So imagine for a second that you were hosting like the most high-stakes meeting in the entire world.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
the kind of meeting where the decisions made are going to literally shape the global economy for decades.
Right, the really big stuff.
Exactly. Ask yourself, who dictates the rules of that room? Like, who arrives early? And perhaps most tellingly, who is forced to wear a mask?
Right, and it's those almost invisible micro-interactions that actually dictate global power. We tend to focus so much on the press conferences and the signed agreements.
Yeah, the official stuff.
Exactly. But the small physical details of how two leaders actually occupy a space,
Yeah,
that often reveals the true macro power dynamics happening right beneath the surface.
totally. And today we are doing a deep dive into how China interprets those exact power dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be unpacking a really influential Chinese political talk show. It's called This is China, specifically episode 169. And our source features Chinese academics, including Professor Zhang Weiwei and Professor Fanyang Peng. And they are basically dissecting the November 2022 G20 summit in Bali. This is the meeting between Chinese President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Joe Biden.
Yeah, and we have to be incredibly clear up front about the lens we are looking through today.
Definitely.
Because this source material is highly partisan.
Yeah.
It represents a distinct nationalistic Chinese viewpoint that is specifically crafted for a domestic audience. So our mission today is not to endorse or validate these perspectives.
Right. We're not taking sides here.
No, not at all. We are just here to impartially deconstruct them. Because to truly be well-informed, you can't just consume news and analysis from your own hemisphere, right?
Yeah, you'd be missing half the picture.
Exactly. Understanding the internal narrative of a geopolitical counterpart is like the ultimate shortcut to grasping global politics.
For sure. And there is a quote mentioned right in this broadcast by French President Emmanuel Macron that I think sets the stage beautifully.
Oh, the elephant quote.
Yeah. He said the U.S. and China are like two large elephants. And when they fight, all the other animals in the jungle get incredibly nervous.
Which is such a vivid image.
It really is.
Yeah.
So today, we are looking at exactly how one of those elephants views the jungle.
And to understand that view, the Chinese broadcast doesn't even start with the actual policies discussed in Bali.
Right.
They place a microscopic focus on the physical protocol of the summit itself. The optics of how the meeting physically occurred are treated as the opening moves of a chess match.
Yeah, and the optics they highlight are fascinating, especially how they framed the buildup to the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
The broadcast really emphasizes that this meeting was requested by the U.S., and they don't frame it as just some standard diplomatic check-in.
No, not at all.
They frame it as a meeting driven by American domestic desperation.
Right.
They point specifically to inflation running at, 8 to 9%, a staggering $30 trillion national debt, and massive waves of layoffs sweeping through Silicon Valley at the time.
So the narrative being built for the Chinese public is this idea of an America coming to the table out of urgent necessity,
Yeah.
fundamentally weakened by its own internal economic chaos, rather than negotiating from a position of unshakable strength.
Right, which sets up the whole location of the meeting.
Exactly.
Because it took place at the Chinese delegation's residence.
Mm-hmm.
And President Biden reportedly arrived 7 minutes early.
Which is huge in diplomacy.
Yeah, and the source even notes he jogged over to shake hands enthusiastically with President Xi.
Like literally jogging.
Literally jogging. But the detail that really signals the power dynamic for these commentators is the mask mandate.
The COVID-19 protocol.
Yeah, the summit strictly followed in its protocols.
Right.
Only the top leaders went on masks. Everyone else in the room had to mask up.
Yeah.
And the Chinese professors point out that the U.S. typically avoids wearing masks at international summits.
Yeah.
They like to project this post-pandemic normalcy.
Exactly. They want to look like everything is back to normal.
Right. But in this room, China firmly enforced its own rules, and the U.S. complied.
Wow.
It reminds me, honestly, of a corporate boardroom negotiation or like a home court advantage in sports.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, making the other side travel to your office and abide by your dress code is a calculated power move.
Yeah.
You are basically forcing the opponent to physically submit to your reality before a single word is even spoken.
That's so true. And the commentators explicitly connect this physical reality to a very specific historical playbook.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, so one of the professors brings up a 1985 meet-in between Chinese President Li Jianyan and the U.S.
Okay.
And back then, they had a fierce argument over diplomatic protocol, specifically whether the Chinese president should visit the U.S. or Canada first.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and China stood firm on visiting Canada first to maintain its diplomatic leverage, and the U.S. eventually had to concede. So the broadcast uses this to draw a direct line. They're saying China stood firm on its rules to assert dominance then, and it forces compliance with its rules now.
Wow, so it's a direct callback. They also highlight a pretty significant semantic shift from President Xi during this meeting, too.
Right, the catchphrase.
Yeah. In the past, his go-to catchphrase was, "The Pacific is big enough for both nations." But at this Bali summit, he upgraded the language. He said, the Earth is big enough for China and the U.S. to develop individually and together.
And upgrading from the Pacific to the Earth is, that's a massive rhetorical leap.
It really is.
It is a deliberate signaling of China's view of its own elevated global status. They are no longer just asking for regional breathing room in Asia,
Right.
It is a statement of absolute global parity.
But, putting your opponent in a mask and upgrading your catchphrases, that's just the warm-up act.
Oh, absolutely.
The real test of this power dynamic happens when they sit down to negotiate the actual red lines. And this is where the Chinese commentators express a profound, almost cynical skepticism about American promises.
Yeah, because naturally, the substantive conversation begins with Taiwan.
Always.
Right. The broadcast frames Taiwan as the core of the core interests and the absolute first red line in U.S.-China relations.
And we should probably pause here and explain why Taiwan holds that quote-unquote core of the core status in this context.
Yeah, that's important.
Because it's a lot more than just national pride. From a geopolitical standpoint, Taiwan represents the crucial link in the first island chain. And that's what the U.S. uses to project power and contain China's naval access to the deep ocean.
Right.
Plus, there is the sheer economic leverage of semiconductor manufacturing. Taiwan is essentially the bottleneck for the world's most advanced technology.
Yeah, and that underlying strategic reality is exactly why the Chinese commentators dissect the diplomatic promises so ruthlessly. According to the broadcast, the U.S. offered what they called the 5 no's.
Okay, the 5 no's.
Yeah. These include promises like not seeking a new Cold War, not seeking to change China's system, and crucially, not supporting Taiwan independence or strengthening alliances against China.
But the commentators immediately dismiss the sincerity of these 5 no's, right?
Oh, completely.
They point out that the U.S. has a long habit of saying one thing in the room and doing another outside of it.
Yep.
They cite instances where the U.S. allegedly omitted these exact promises from their officially published readouts of the meeting.
Exactly.
And they also point to Nancy Pelosi's highly publicized visit to Taiwan, which, happened right after previous U.S. reassurances.
Right. And the source actually uses a traditional philosophical framework to explain this American behavior.
Okay.
They contrast 2 concepts, Dao and Shu.
Dao and Shu.
Yeah. Dao meaning the way, and Shu meaning tactics.
Okay, so the broadcast claims the U.S. operates entirely on Shu, meaning like short-term, deceptive, almost rogue tactics just to solve immediate crises or win news cycles.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, they claim China operates on Dao, taking a long-term moral responsibility for the arc of global history.
That's the framing.
But, okay, hold on. I got to push back on the logic of these commentators for a second.
Sure.
If they truly believe the U.S. is completely untrustworthy, right, and only acts with short-term deceptive tactics, why do they place so much triumphant value on extracting these 5 no's from Biden in the first place? Like,
Right.
Why go on national television to celebrate a promise from someone you just said always breaks their promises?
What's fascinating here is that the professors actually address that paradox.
Oh, they do?
Yeah, and the mechanism behind it is entirely about leverage.
Okay.
For them, extracting those promises isn't about trusting the U.S. to perfectly execute them. It's about capturing the moral high ground on the global stage. Right. Getting those 5 no's on the record proves to their domestic audience, and more importantly to the global South, that China's strategy of diplomatic struggle actually works.
Okay.
It forces the U.S. to publicly make tactical compromises. And when the U.S. inevitably breaks those promises, China can point to the record and say, look, we are the reasonable ones operating on Dao, and they are the chaotic actors operating on Shu.
That is, wow, that is a really calculated way to look at it.
Extremely calculated.
So, since they view the U.S. as an unreliable bilateral partner, the broadcast argues that China is looking past Washington entirely.
Right.
They are focusing on the broader global chessboard. And on that chessboard, they believe the U.S. is actively losing ground.
And they use a very specific Western academic framework to make this point.
Which one?
Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilizations.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The broadcast argues that the U.S. is retreating on 3 major civilizational fronts.
Let's break those fronts down because the specific examples they use are pretty revealing.
Definitely.
First is the Islamic front.
Mm-hmm.
And the mechanism here isn't just about military losses. They point to the messy U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan as a signal of unreliability.
Right. They see it as causing Middle Eastern countries to actively distance themselves from Washington's influence.
Yeah. And then there's the Orthodox front.
Yeah, highlighting the draining, ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The Chinese analysts basically view the Eastern European and Russian cultural sphere as a distinct civilizational bloc, where Western expansion, specifically via NATO, is bleeding the U.S. dry financially and politically.
And finally, the Chinese front. Here they cite failed U.S. trade and tech wars. But they also specifically point to what they describe as failed U.S. attempts at color revolutions in Hong Kong and Xinjiang.
And we should clarify, a color revolution is a highly charged geopolitical term.
Right.
It's used by China and Russia to describe what they view as Western-backed regime change.
Right. So when protests happen in these regions, the Chinese narrative frames them not as, organic domestic unrest.
Exactly, no. They frame it as deliberate foreign interference orchestrated by the West. So defeating these movements is framed as successfully repelling an American civilizational attack.
This leads to the critical contrast of the whole broadcast, the idea of encirclement versus a friend circle.
Right.
The U.S., they argue, is desperately trying to build an encirclement strategy to contain China, using, military bases and rigid alliances.
Mm-hmm.
But China is countering this by building a global friend circle.
And they offer concrete proof points for this friend circle. They point to the STO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Samarkand.
Okay.
At that summit, Iran joined the organization, the UAE became an observer, and crucially, India proposed building an SEO supply chain.
Wait, India? India proposing an alternative supply chain is a massive deal.
Oh, it's huge.
Considering the U.S. has been aggressively trying to woo India into its own anti-China coalition.
Exactly. The broadcast frames India's proposal as open defiance of U.S. strategy.
It feels like we are watching 2 fundamentally different approaches to global influence.
Yeah.
It's like the difference between a massive legacy corporate conglomerate aggressively trying to buy out competitors and force everyone into exclusive restrictive contracts.
Right.
Versus a company launching an open-source software platform.
Oh, the open source analogy is incredibly apt here. China is presenting itself to the global south as the open source platform.
Yeah.
They say, we don't demand exclusive military alliances. We will just build your roads, your 5G networks, your high-speed railways.
It feels voluntary.
Exactly. Voluntary, collaborative, and entirely non-restrictive.
But the hidden mechanism of that open source model is the lock-in effect, right?
Absolutely.
Eventually, your entire country's physical and digital hardware is running on their operating system. You become fully integrated into their ecosystem, not through force, but through reliance.
Which transitions perfectly into how China is successfully building this friend circle. The Chinese analysts argue it comes down to providing tangible deliverables versus delivering empty ideological lectures.
Yeah, the broadcast directly contrasts the U.S. diplomatic approach with their own.
Mm-hmm.
They claim the U.S. shows up to developing nations with heavy-handed lectures about democracy and human rights, but very meager financial backing.
Right.
They specifically cite U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris visiting the Philippines and offering what the commentators view as a paltry $60 million.
And they hold up that $60 million against China's strategy of massive infrastructure investment.
Yeah.
The prime example they use is the Jakarta-Bandung high-speed railway in Indonesia.
Yeah, they call the railway an internet-famous success.
Like, it literally went viral over there.
Yeah, and they argue it proves the China model works. It demonstrates that China can drop into a foreign country, solve incredibly complex, multi-layered infrastructure problems, and actually deliver mutual economic prosperity without demanding political purity.
But, and this is key, the narrative introduces a crucial third element here. It's not just about building railways and being friendly.
Right.
The broadcast heavily features the Zihai Air Show, where China proudly displayed full combat-ready military systems. And they note that Middle Eastern countries were reportedly viewing this air show like Double 11.
And for anyone who doesn't know, Double 11 is Singles Day in China. which is essentially the equivalent of a massive Black Friday shopping holiday.
Right, chaotic shopping.
Yeah. They are saying foreign nations were window shopping for advanced weaponry with the excitement of Black Friday deal hunters, thrilled to find a reliable alternative to the U.S. security umbrella.
Exactly.
But isn't there a glaring irony here? I mean, we have a broadcast that spends significant time criticizing the U.S. for being overly aggressive and militaristic.
Yeah.
But in the exact same breath, they were celebrating the fact that foreign nations are buying up advanced Chinese combat systems.
Well, the Chinese perspective presented in the broadcast doesn't see that as a contradiction at all.
No.
No, they view this hard power not as aggression, but as the absolute prerequisite for soft power. Their underlying logic is that you cannot offer peace, stability, and economic growth, like the high-speed rail in Indonesia,
Right.
if you cannot protect those assets from U.S. interference. The advanced weaponry at the air show is the shield that allows the railway to be built.
Wow. They call it the combo punch.
The combo punch, yeah.
First is moral appeal, which is their overarching vision for a shared future. Second is benefit appeal, which is the high-speed rail, the 5G networks, the tangible economics. And third is hard power, the military strength to back it all up and protect the system from outside disruption.
And that brings us to the final and perhaps most pertinent argument the broadcast makes about why the world is tilting toward China.
Okay.
It comes down to what they consider the ultimate currency in modern geopolitics.
Predictability.
Predictability.
Here's where the narrative gets really aggressive.
Yeah.
The source boldly argues that the biggest source of uncertainty in the entire world today is the United States itself.
They point directly to the American democratic system as a structural weakness. Because the U.S. holds elections every 4 years, its foreign policy is inherently chaotic and bipolar.
Yeah.
The broadcast points to Donald Trump's China virus rhetoric, followed by Kevin McCarthy's push for an anti-China committee.
Right.
They see these as prime examples of this internal political mess constantly spilling out and disrupting the global stage.
And they argue the global allies are getting tired of being, quote-unquote, sprained by these sudden, radical U.S. policy shifts. And they cite a very specific high-stakes example. The Netherlands refusing U.S. pressure to stop selling lithography machines to China.
And we should probably explain what those machines are.
Yeah, please do.
Because it highlights exactly what is at stake. Lithography machines are incredibly complex, multi-million-dollar printers that use light to carve nanoscale circuits.
Wow.
Yeah, they are absolutely essential to manufacturing the world's most advanced microchips. And a Dutch company essentially has a monopoly on the most advanced versions of these machines.
Right. And the U.S. government has heavily pressured the Netherlands to stop selling these machines to China, basically to kneecap Chinese tech development.
Exactly.
But according to the broadcast, the Netherlands resisted because they simply want to do business.
Right.
They don't want their massive economic sectors yanked around every time the Oval Office changes hands and Washington decides on a new foreign policy priority.
The broadcast actually anchors this concept in ancient philosophy, referencing a quote from Sun Tzu's Art of War.
Oh, classic.
Yeah, the quote is, "Do not depend on the enemy not coming. Depend rather on being ready for him." So for these analysts, China's internal political certainty, the fact that its leadership and strategic goals do not change every 4 years,
Right.
that is their impenetrable shield against American external uncertainty.
It's kind of like comparing the U.S. to a streaming service that radically changes its subscription model, jacks up the price, and deletes your favorite shows every 4 years based on a new CEO.
That's hilarious, but yeah, it's pretty accurate.
Eventually, the subscribers, in this case, global allies, are just going to cancel and look for a more stable network. They want to know what they're paying for over the next 20 years, not just the next election cycle.
Exactly. That desire for stability is exactly the sentiment the Chinese broadcast is trying to capture and project to the rest of the world.
So let's zoom out and summarize what we've uncovered in this deep dive.
Sounds good.
The Chinese broadcast, this is China, presents a meticulously constructed worldview. It's a world where U.S. attempts at containment have structurally failed, where American diplomatic tactics are viewed as desperate, chaotic, and inconsistent, and where China's strategic patience, their tangible infrastructure projects, and their absolute political predictability are successfully winning over the global South.
And we really have to reiterate,
Yeah.
This is a curated domestic narrative designed to bolster Chinese confidence and project inevitable strength.
We're not saying it's the objective truth.
No, not at all. But observing how they articulate that confidence, understanding the specific metrics they use to measure their own success and American decline, that is vital intelligence for anyone trying to navigate the 21st century.
Right.
Because this narrative isn't just theory, you know? It actively shapes the reality of the listener. The stability of global supply chains, the price of your electronics, the strength of Western alliances,
Yeah.
all of it is actively shifting based on this exact perception of American chaos versus Chinese stability.
Which brings us right back to that high-stakes meeting room we imagined at the very beginning.
Yeah.
The masks, the early arrivals, the seating arrangements. It's never just protocol. It's the entire global power dynamic distilled into a handshake.
Exactly.
So we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you watch the news this week.
Okay.
If international relations in the coming decades are increasingly decided by which superpower can offer the most predictability and economic stability, rather than which one preaches the most freedom or ideals, how might the map of global alliances shift in ways we aren't even expecting?
It's a question that challenges a lot of deeply held assumptions about what the rest of the world actually values.
It really does. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.